This is Stevie here doing a video for my Home Depot review of the WEN 13-inch benchtop planer with spiral cutter head. In this video I will be doing an overview of this tool here, and the second half of the video will be a demonstration of how it works. But basically this is a benchtop planer. It's meant to reduce the thickness in wood for you. So for example, I have two pieces of scrap here. Put it down real quick. One is a 3/4 inch stock, the other is maybe a 1/2 inch or less. If you want basically to make this this board, this board as thick as this board, you can by running it through. There's a big cutter head in there, and it will shave off a section of the board to make it thinner. You can also reduce the width of a board. So if you want this board to be as wide as this board, you could flip it up, usually with other boards along it, and run it through, and it will reduce the thickness of the board. So it's a pretty neat tool, especially if you're like me and you work with mostly the 3/4 inch stock boards, and you want to get precise board thickness. This is great. Other folks use these to refurbish older wood, shred a 1/16 or 1/32 of an inch off each side, and turn old deck boards into new ones. That works for them. Just keep in mind those boards are dirty, and dirt and sharp blades don't mix, so you will dull the blades out fast. Also, it's not a good idea to run finished or painted wood in here, because they could essentially kind of melt the finish and gunk up the cutter head. So get into the planer here. I'll come in first. I'll go to the cutter head under here, and don't worry, I have this unplugged. Let me get an angle there. Okay. So this is the cutter head. This spins my direction. And basically the piece of wood goes through here, and it shaves off a certain amount of it, which I will get into the thicknesses here in a second. The way this one operates, most planers, or especially the older ones, have 2 to 3 long blades, and they just kind of swoop, they come in and plane a board. This is a spiral cutter head, so it has all these little teeth on it. You can see all these little teeth here. And I'm going to flip my hand around, and as I move this wheel, you see how they're staggered. So as I'm moving it, the teeth are all staggered down. So as it spins, it gets a nice cut going all the way across. The advantages to these are they're a little quieter, shavings are smaller, and they give a smoother finish. Also, instead of replacing larger blades, you just have to replace smaller blades. And these blades each have 2 sharp sides on them. So when they get dull, you just loosen them, spin them around, and tighten them back up. And new blades for this, I will put the product number for those in the description. 10 blades is $45. And this spiral cutter head has 26 blades on it. Other things I'll note down here. There's a roller here, and there's a roller in the back, and these rollers pretty much compress and help push your board through. So, and as I come out, I'll point out the in-feed table and the out-feed table there. They help to hold your wood up. The manual and a lot of professional carpenters will recommend raising this table up 1 millimeter above here to prevent snipe, which is basically the end of your board getting planed lower than you wanted it to. And you can do that with these 2 bolts, which is on both tables. All right, before I move away from here, here's the circuit breaker. If that ever goes, you hit reset here. Here's the on-off switch. If you pull this little key out, it's a child safety. So if your kids are playing near your planer for whatever reason, they don't plane their hand off, you can pull that out. Here's the cut indicator. And you'll see when I put a board in here in just a minute. When you stick it in there, it pushes this little button, and it tells you how much the machine is going to plane off. And finally, to replace the carbon brush on the motor is right there. So, and this is the whole cutter head assembly here. And it goes up and down on 4 big bolts. This is a 15 amp motor. I will note, I don't know if I can sneak in here. This motor is run by a belt. We can't see it. So anyway, there's a belt and not chains in there, so it's a little quieter and a little more reliable. Here's the depth gauge. This is basically this planer will cut wood 13 inches wide maximum, up to 6 inches thick or deep. And this is the depth gauge here, the cut depth gauge. So right now it's reading, I can't stand that it's magnified. I think it's like 2 3/8 of an inch. So whatever board goes through here, the cutter head is 2 3/8 of an inch above this stick. And that is what thickness it will cut it down to. On that note, and almost left this out, this planer will, in one pass, will take off as much as 1/8 of an inch. You generally don't want to do that. If you do it, you want to do it with softwoods like pine. But normally you want to do, on each pass, you want to take off only a 1/16 of an inch or a 32nd of an inch to give you a nice smooth cut and to not wear out the cutter heads and the motor. So I usually stick 1/16 of an inch and below. For hardwoods like oak, you definitely don't want to go over 1/32 of an inch. So that pretty much covers everything here. While I was going over the depth gauge, I'll show you. This planer has a feature called a depth stop, and you basically set it to whatever thickness you want the board. So I can leave it on 3/4, and then when you do your depth adjustment knob up here and you lower it down, actually I think I'm raising it. If I kept on going, it would stop at 3/4 of an inch. One of the issues I had with this planer was this was about 3/32 of an inch off. So I had to take this little door off, and there was a little bolt in there, and I had to readjust this. So this was synced up with this. So I don't really use this. All right, so coming up to the top, we have the depth adjustment knob. Handy sign here, one turn is 1/16 of an inch. So if I go like this, I have just lowered the cutter head 1/16 of an inch. If you do a half turn, that is 1/32 of an inch. And if you do a quarter turn, that is 1/64 of an inch. So I find it most convenient once you get set up and all, and you're doing your passes. I like to go off this gauge. I poke my board in there. It tells me, okay, you're doing 1/32 on this cut. Okay, pass the board through, grab it on the other side, bring it over, flip it, and then I can do my one full turn here for 1/16 of an inch. Or I'm sorry, I usually do a half turn, for 1/32. So pass through, half turn, pass through, half turn. So assembly out of the box, this is one of two things I had to put on. This gets screwed on here with a little screw. And then I'll segue into the next part. Other thing I'd assemble is the dust port extractor here. This will fit a 2.5 inch or 4 inch hose. Highly recommend using a shop vac on this. Most of the shavings will fly out of here, but some will blow out of the back, into the sides, into the planer, and out of the front. But this was, I just had to put this on with 2 different knobs here. And also there's a star wrench and a hex wrench to do the different maintenance on the machine that you have to. One thing I'll note, I have not done it yet. A lot of carpenters recommend, and the manual recommends, to put some paste wax on the in-feed table, on this table here, on the main table, and the outfeed. The wax just helps the board slide through quicker when they are being planed. So that about covers everything on this planer right now. So I will go quickly into a piece of wood that I cut. So this is my practice board here. When I got this machine, I don't really need this board. It was a sacrificial board for a bunch of reasons, just to get used to it, just to get things set up. One thing I will note, when I first turned this thing on for the first time, there's packing grease in there. There's all sorts of grease and oil and stuff from the factory that goes flying all over the place. And on the other side of this board, you can actually see some of it made it onto the wood here and there. So I recommend, when you fire this thing up, wipe it down good. Put a piece of scrap you don't want in there, just to get everything calibrated and synced. because the last thing you want is grease or oil getting onto a piece of wood that you're going to paint or stain. So anyway, I ran this board through, it was 3/4 of an inch, now it's about 5/8 of an inch. And pretty smooth overall. I did a 32nd of an inch. I was very pleased with how smooth it was. Generally, I wouldn't sand it. However, I did get some snipe on it. I brought that up earlier, and you can actually see it right there. Pretty much on every cut. I don't know if you can see it there. You can see it on that end there a little bit. It's about 1 millimeter from that kind of dark line there over is about 1 millimeter lower than the rest of the board. And there's some snipe there that you can kind of see. Another thing I got a little bit of tear out on, let me try to change it so you can see it. I got a little bit of tear out on both sides. There's actually a little there where it looks like some grease got in. I'll turn the board this way, but yeah, you can see those little light nicks. That was some light tear out. You can see that snipe there better. What was interesting was I fed this board in both ways, and tear out is basically when you feed the board in with the grain going the wrong way, the cutter heads can actually nick it. This is what I thought was a pretty easy board to guess the grain in. I fed like this side, I fed in going this way, and you see how the grain slopes down here? You want the cutter head going downhill, so I put it in the correct way, going downhill, and you can see I got some little nicks here and there, which looks a lot like tear out to me. So you can see a lot of it, most of it was on this grain on the right here, and I think maybe because that was just a change in the grain of the wood. So I'm still calibrating and working on this thing. I might do lower passes next time. Tear out, something that happens on these. Snipe pretty much is very, very, very common, and I was saying if you raise both of the beds, that can help. The manual for this is just not how to maintain this machine. It is how to run it, and it is how to try to avoid snipe and tear out and things like that. So I highly recommend reading through this, especially if you've never worked with one of these before. So other than the factory settings and some of the tear out I got here, I really like this planer. A lot of these can be sanded out easy, but if I were to stain this board, these spots would all come in very, very, very dark at this point. So, but anyway, that concludes my overview of this machine. Next, I'm gonna should fade on over to a demonstration of me. Actually, I took a video of me planing that board there. So I hope this video helped inform you of your purchasing decision. Thank you for watching. Brought this outside because I don't want to make a big mess inside right now. Anyway, I'm going to fire up, and I'm going to pass this piece of pine through. Notice how I have the grain, so the cutter heads are working downhill on the grain. And I'm going to do a 1 32nd inch pass on each cut. So you can see the reading there. So fire her up, and we'll see how she works. You can see the chips that come out of it here are just small shreds. Blades are nice and sharp. Smooth finish. All right. Very nice and smooth finish on this board. Yeah, this board should be about a 1/2 inch thickness now. So it came out great. Takes a little bit of setup, you know, with some of the factory settings and all, but once you get it right, this is a really great benchtop thickness planer.